Welcome, welcome, family. Welcome. I hope all is well with you as it is with me. I first want to discuss this very, how can I say, important conversation. Um, and it's about how a lot of us are having to suffer from what we see. And a lot of times in my discussions, I break it down and I talk about how a lot of our people um, tend to think that we're not at war. They don't see it. And so they make moves that end up causing a tragedy. Um, they don't know that we're having to um, maneuver through a system that has been created around in this world here against us. They don't get that. So we see children, innocent children, who fall victim to our open enemies, to those who um, can't stand our differences. And unfortunately, they had parents that thought that there was no difference, or didn't, in their mind, the life was unbearable, or sometimes things happen and parents pass away and the children are left without anyone. But that's unfortunate for us in our community that we don't have uh, a measures in place for things that happen like that, when there's no next to kin that the child could be passed to. um, but in this society, too often we see Black children in the hands of Caucasians. And I'm just going to come out and say that I disagree highly with with white people being able to adopt our children, or being able our children being able to be in the possession of these people, because it's detrimental to their health, their mind, their mental state, and their life. And just the other day, I was in Target, and I had seen a tiny baby girl. She was able to sit up in the, in the buggy, but I saw her with the white couple, and um, she was excited when the man came up to her, because I know the man was off looking around, and then he came back to her and the mother, and she was ever extremely excited. But the mom, the white woman, she kind of covered, and when she saw me, she kind of covered and sheltered the child away. But I just observed and walked on. But I did feel some kind of way, because you know, as any Nubian person would feel a kind of way, something kind of way about that situation, because look at our history in this country. Look at, I'm 47. And can you imagine that all of my whole life has been dealing with this? Can you? I haven't known anything different but the struggle. I don't care how many white best friends I thought I might have had, or how many white friends or people that, associates. in work or school, that didn't take away the facts, the truth of the matter. That doesn't ever take away the truth of the matter. There's too many things, there's too much manipulation, too much things in this so-called, it's not a relationship, but situation that we have been forced in as a people. To have to see our children amongst the very people. It's lunatic. That's why I always say this society that we're in is very psychotic. We have to be. Society, everybody has to be psychotic to be functioning in this manner. In this manner. But the thing about it is, I know, people say, well, I can do what I want to do. I can love who I want to love. I can you know, do this or go this way or go, you know, yeah, that's fine. But I don't think we can do it under white supremacy without when justice is not anything that is even taken in consideration when it comes to us. So there's a lot, I know it's not going to stop. There's going to continue to be this unconscious movement of women and men to make the decision to put their children in orphanages or even to allow that to happen. I'm going to tell you about my story. A white woman literally tried to take my baby. A white woman literally tried to take my baby girl away and have her taken by the state. I was doing everything right as a mother. But when you don't have people that look like you and you're not in a community, you're vulnerable. And that's the problem. We're vulnerable. So my story is I got involved in, you know, the city, right? I guess you could call it a non-for-profit organization to assist me, in parenting. So I went and did that and everything was, and did the mommy and me classes with the baby. But then they'll have you where do you need someone to come to your house? So I volunteered to have someone come to my house and help me, which was a big mistake. But I thought it was good because I had someone there to talk to about, ideas on things I could do for the baby and how to, dealing with the baby. Even though I was a second time mother, I didn't get to spend as much. I wasn't at home mother. I was a full-time working mother the first time. And I did then have somebody to help me. But this time it was like this woman supervisor that would come to my house. She was more overly, you know, snooping or trying to find something that I was doing wrong so she can get CPS. So she finally got CPS on me because I wouldn't do something that was suggested, and they were very controlling. So I had to deal with CPS for for about a month or so. And then, luckily, when I was dealing with CPS, there was all people that looked like me. So it was more of a cultural understanding, you know, and not dealing with people that wouldn't support it or more like my opposite, my enemy, you know, that wouldn't be more supportive of me and the situation. So that blew over. I actually, my daughter's healthy, she's good. I didn't have to deal with them anymore. But that was my situation. And that's why, you can't tell people how to live their lives or what to do or decisions to make. But the whole thing that comes out of that comes out of us living in this society as if we don't have anything to protect our children from. That's how we live. We live like we don't have anything to protect our children from. So you see, the other people that look like us see that there was some parents who looked like us, but they didn't take care of their children or didn't care about their children and allow their children to be taken in orphanages. Then we have to suffer. We have to see children being put into dangerous situations. And it's out of our control. It's out of our control. God failed us. God failed us because God did not know about themselves enough to know that they could have overcome any anything that came in their way with love for that child, that child wouldn't get from the world, anyone else in this world. They couldn't, they couldn't see that. They couldn't see that. It's a lot of different situations to why children end up in orphanages. So, I'm just saying that now the children are in danger many times. You can't just have children and just put them in an adoption agency because white people say so, because white people do it and it must be all right. Because what happens is this: the whole thing is when you are the one that's supposed to save yourself, how are you saving yourself when you keep falling and doing the same thing over and over again? We start this family curse, this curse of doing the same thing over and over again, neglecting, not being connected, not making plans. Like if something happens, do I have enough family members? Do I have a certain person that I know that that can take care of the children if something happens to me and my husband? Or you know, because our community is broken down, we don't, a lot of times we don't have that anymore. We don't have that. But the whole thing is, we're the ones to save ourselves. And if we're not saving ourselves, if we're giving up our children or allowing our children to fall into traps, into the hands of someone who does not care for them at all, because we trust the system somehow, then that's what we get. That's what we get. We get abused over and over again, back into slavery children. Our children go back into slavery within this society because we think that these people have changed. We think somebody's changed. They ain't changed. There's no such thing as change. There's only the false fake dates and times. But other than that, everything's stagnant. Stagnant. So I'm going to play this beautiful video here. I'm going to listen to the elder John Henry Clark speak. So please enjoy, family.
Look right into the camera, sir. All right. Peace be unto you, brothers and sisters. This is your brother, Ishaka Musa Barashango, at the office of renowned scholar, historian, actually dean of scholars, the one that we all look up to, the one that we all look to, and the one that we glory in because of his enormous knowledge that we have been able to draw from and that we in turn have been able to pass on to others. We're speaking of none other than Dr. John Henry Clark. This is a great moment for me indeed, because I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Clark on several occasions. We have been on the same podium at the same time or in the same building doing workshops or seminars, but this is the very first time I've ever had the opportunity to appear on the camera with him, and I am indeed delighted. Dr. Clark, how you feeling today?
Fine.
Thank you so much for having this interview with us, and we're going to get right on into the subject matter at hand today. We're dealing with the topic generally of the African origin of the Bible, and we're approaching the Bible and its development from an African-centered worldview. And our first question to you, Dr. Clark, is according to your great research, and it is indeed has been prodigious, how did the African see his place in nature, and how did he see God, and how did he express his concepts of God in his everyday life?
The African saw himself in relationship to nature as he saw nature and God as one and the same. And we must remember that for most of the existence of man, the word God was not used. And yet man had a great spirituality and a great affinity for the concept that man would later call God. Africa recognized that there was a spiritual force in the universe. He knew he could not make the rain, change the seasons. He could not make a hurricane, and he could not stop one. So he recognized that this force in the world was in charge, was a force bigger than himself. And he tried to bring man in harmony with nature, as against Western man, who often tries to defy nature. but he did not use the word God, and yet he recognized the spiritual force in the world that man would later call God.
Dr. Clark, I've often heard throughout the years that this word God is used in the English word language. Is actually the word dog spelled backwards.
Yes, and man was late in using it, and whether this is coincidental, I do not know, but it is somewhat ironical that is the case, because the God concept that we know came out of the conference in Nicaea in Europe, 325 AD. But the spiritual concept was always there, recognized by the African, who thought that the spiritual force that ruled the universe was in everything that lives. Therefore, the African would meditate sometime before cutting down a tree, because a tree was a part of life. He'd only cut down what he needed, and he thought that the spiritual force of the universe was in the water, so he could stand by the water and meditate or pray, or in a tree, and he could stand by the tree, or in himself, so he could meditate within himself. And so he did not need a church as such, and he did not need someone to intervene between himself and the spiritual force of the universe, because he thought that he was a part of that totality and he could communicate directly.
Now, Dr. Clark, what is the difference between religion and spirituality?
Religion is an artificial form that came later when man organized spirituality into forms and denominations, into concepts, and each group tried to prove that their concept was the true concept and the one most entitled to prevail. Now you see hypocrisy entering spirituality and killing its meaning. Now, spirituality is the recognition of the spiritual force of the universe and the recognition of your relationship toward all living things and your responsibility toward all living things. I have examined a lot of African indigenous belief systems, and most of them are based on African spirituality as against religions. And spirituality, you do not discriminate. Your wife can belong to one version of it, you can belong to another, and there's no conflict between you based on that. And this was carried over into the United States, because within my own family, I got nearly everything except the Catholic. I might have them now, when I didn't have them in my growing up days, but we had Methodists and Holy Rollers and Sanctified people, although we were predominantly Baptists. We were predominantly Baptists, and even our best religious jokes were about the Methodists, because they got sprinkled instead of being immersed in the water. See, with the coming of religion and denominations and churches and ministers, economics entered, commerce entered. To have a church, you got to have someone to build the church. The church has to be maintained. To have a preacher, he has to be maintained. So once commerce entered, the Bible, the religion became a money-making entity with all of its pretense of holiness, and it could not sustain itself without funds. So it became a fundraising gimmick. And I say that going away from spirituality, which is the recognition of all living things in their worth, when in religion you give preference to your chosen denomination and people who adhere to your chosen denomination. Religion has a sense of prejudice throughout. In fact, nearly all religions are violations of the God concept by dictionary definition. Because if you take the dictionary definition of God, God is kind, God is gracious, and God is nonpartisan, which is just the opposite of religions. A Catholic will not concede that a Protestant is right or can be right. That's ungodly.
It certainly is.
So when you deal with the ungodly nature of religion, the Protestant nature of religions, the Protestant nature of religion, you can find out that religions violate, sometimes by their very being, the concept of God.
And truly, one's system of belief or their spiritual identification directly impacts on how they relate to others.
Yes.
So,
yes.
what were the elements of African culture that demonstrated our belief in democracy and true justice in our society?
The respect for the family and the assumption that elders had lived longer than others, therefore they were wiser in choices, and you created an atmosphere in which the elder automatically became wiser in making choices, because you created an atmosphere where he couldn't be corrupted. By virtue of being an elder, he got his sandals, and he got his clothing, and he got his food, and he was a professional thinker.
Mm-hmm.
And when you had a difficulty, you went to him to think it out and to resolve it. He had lived through youth and middle age, and now he's eldership, so he had learned a lot of things. And yet he never charged you for advice, but you never charged him for the sandals and the food and the clothing either. So it was an exchange that brought about stability. You always had someone to turn to. The uncle plays a major role in African family structures. So that family structure, based on these values, there was no word for prostitution because no one had ever been one. And the idea was unthinkable. When you look at the structure of the society, if a lady is not married at a certain age, two families got together to see what could be done about it until they found a suitable man for her. Well, she found one for herself. They found one for her. See, this was a period before the invention. I'm using the word advisor when I say invention of the romantic "I love you" marriage. So that's where we went wrong. That's where we began to have trouble, because the Africans' marriage was based on respect and bringing families together, and sometimes bringing villages together. So when two people married, you had a whole lot of cows and goats and thinking, because each side of the family put together enough means so that they could sustain themselves and make sure they had land. And they didn't have to petition. They didn't have to go into debt. They didn't have to take out any notes. But you belonged to that particular group, and you expected, by virtue of bringing children into being and by virtue of your behavior, to enhance that group. And that group, by virtue of you belonging to it, protects you by making sure that you had the means of sustaining your family. If you didn't have enough goats, they would go to one family, you give them one goat, you give them until you got 10 goats, you know. Mm-hmm. The same thing, each family gonna give you 10 cows. So you begin the marriage with 20 cows.
Now, how did that affect our sense of justice and fairness towards
It's the sense of justice as much as it is understood that a human being has a right to live, has a right to have the things that sustain a good life, to keep the human being from begging for those human materials that makes human life livable and basically comfortable. There was no great riches, but there was no poverty at all. If there was poverty at all, then that poverty was shared by the whole group, as riches was shared by the whole group. Now, they already had what Karl Marx was advocating, a classless society.
What the Dr. Chancellor Williams, peace be upon him, refers to as the African constitutional system.
Yeah.
Everybody's needs was looked after.
Each according to his age.
Now, how was this incorporated into Christianity, or were any of these principles incorporated into Christianity? And can they be in any way identifiable, or are they manifested in?
See, they were what was incorporated into Christianity idealistically and verbally was the African family's structure of doing to each one as doing unto others as you would have them to do unto you. Basic protection. And when St. Augustine heard about the converts at Nicaea, he said, these people make me laugh. They're giving us a religion we had 3,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. So now let's deal with that. Then let's deal with the formalization behind a personality called Jesus Christ.
Now, St. Augustine was who, for many people who may not know?
St. Augustine was the father of Catholic literature, and he was instrumental in creating the intellectual literature, the basic theories that went into the making of the Catholic Church.
Where did he come from? Where was he indigenous to?
Indigenous to North Africa.
Was he himself?
He was not Arab. He was not Arab. He was not Berber. He was African.
So he's somewhere in our ancestral line.
Yeah, no one has proved anything any different. I call St. Augustine the holy sinner, because in his early life, he, like the ladies so much, he took up residence in house of prostitution and lived there, and had a child there. And like most men who tinge with a spot of hypocrisy, after that, he began to blame a lot of the sins of the world on women. He's about exhausted by then. But he did. But I think his confession and his other books laid the basis for intelligent church literature and the beautiful simplicity of his writing. Not complicated in his theory and his writing. There was a lot of great writers for the church whose writing is just too complicated to read it, not for the layman, you know. And I've tried to read St. Thomas Aquinas and Cece.
And Justin Martyr.
Yeah. Martin Luther was a little less confusing, but confusing enough.
Could it have been, Dr. Clark, they weren't clear themselves on what the Christianity was?
Yeah, it might be. I think the beautiful simplicity in the writings of St. Augustine, you know, that he had time to think things out, you know, himself, because between his years hanging out with the ladies, and he went through years of refinement and debriefing, of serious introspection.
Well, he was one in a long line of African church fathers.
Yes,
of the
but
original African church.
and yet he was a little more significant than the three Africans who became Pope.
Then there was the Tertullian and Origen and
The-
Cipriani,
yeah,
all of these being African. And that brings to mind the fact that the original church or Christianity, as we have come to know it, was first established among African people.
it was established and brought into being by, the Christian church as we know it today. The Christian church. Let's make a distinction between the formal Christian church and the ideas of Christianity. That's a world of difference between that. Now, this is well documented in a book called Roman Africa. Roman taxation and Roman imperial brutality made people question old religions and look to new religions. And they turned to myth and suppositions and brought into being out of myth the story of a resurrected Christ.
What made them choose Jesus? And that also brings to
They
mind.
didn't at first, because he was never referred to as Jesus in his lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the writing about him occurred 80 years after his death, and that he began to run as Jesus the Christ. The very word Christ is not of African origin. It's from Krishna. It's more of East Indian origin than African.
Well, Rogers tells us that the word means the black one, the anointed one, because the one kissed of the sun was worthy of being the most anointed.
It could well mean that.
Now, this Jesus, who we know from the study of history, was a black man.
Whose picture we know.
Oh, yes, sure, I think is the proper word.
Now, let's make a distinction between the physical Jesus and the picture that the Pope commissioned Michelangelo to paint in the 15th century. Now, at the Conference of Nicaea, where they lost the books of the Bible that they didn't want to deal with, by putting them on the table and said that in the morning, the books that God don't want us to use will be gone. And so there were no lost books of the Bible. They were the books that was left out of the Bible, especially the book of Mary. It tells you what Joseph said when he discovered Mary was with child. He knew it wasn't his child. Otherwise, they could not create the Immaculate Conception had they left the book of Mary in there. Now, the idea of Immaculate Conception is old, because in Africa, a woman can have 9 children if her reputation is good and honorable, and if she's frequented only by one man. The African will say that her skirt is clean, her mouth is sweet. She is virgin. So the idea of virginity has absolutely nothing to do with whether you have had a child by process of cohabitation or not. Because the Europeans now wanted to create something that had a similar purity. They now would give a lady a child without having intercourse with a man.
Does this also have something to do with the fact that most of them were misogynists? They didn't want, but they couldn't get around exalting a woman to a higher state in the Christian church, because most people at the time that they were trying to convert to the religion was into the mother goddess concept. And in order to elevate Mary to that status, they had to take her out of the realm of humanity, so to speak.
They had to make a super supernatural Mary. And I think it's unfair to her because they had to dehumanize her by elevating her above human.
Mm-hmm.
And Mary, not Christ, should be at the heart, the focal point of the Christian religion.
Well, as ironic as it is, the Catholics in some way have done that.
They have done that in some of their rituals, but they have steadily fought against even having a minor female administrator in the church.
Now, this person who eventually came to be called Jesus by them,
the picture that we get, it wasn't painted until the 15th century.
what was he actually like? What was happening in the Hebrew? He was a Hebrew, we know that. And what was happening with the Hebrews? What was the dynamic going on between them and the Roman government at that time who were occupying their land in that little nation of Judea?
Well, the Romans occupying their land until they got on the Romans' nerves, and the Romans destroyed the last temple, 7th AD.
But they say it was a hotbed there, especially where Jesus was raised, around Nazareth in Galilee, was a hotbed of rebellion. They were constantly carrying out some type of revolt.
But they're still doing it. We're talking about people of the Hebrew faith as distinguished between people we call Jews. The word Jew had its greatest development in Europe. There are people of the Hebrew faith all over the world, in India and China and South Sea Islands, who never use the word Jew, who still belong to the Hebrew faith, and whose conversion to the Hebrew faith is older than that of Europe. The Europeans, Hebrews, were converted in the 8th century, 850 or thereabout.
Well, they felt that the Romans really had no right to rule over them, not only because they were invaders, but their laws said, their Torah said that only God ruled them. Only the Creator was their ruler. This ruled through their king that came out from their midst.
But the Romans were no respecter of local customs or local laws. And even with the trial of Jesus Christ for sorcery, the Romans did not want a part of it. But because the Roman law, the crime of sorcery was major and therefore had to be taken to the Roman government. Minor crimes, they could try themselves. And so when they took him before the Roman emperor, the Roman emperor realized that he was no enemy of Rome. That he wasn't telling Romans to give their money to the poor or turn the other cheek. He wasn't driving Romans from the temple. He was driving his own people. So the Romans had no vested interest in interfering with all of this internal matter between the people they had colonized. And so he pushed them back to the crowd and said, he's your king. And they pushed him back toward the Romans. It's not my king. So we see the essential beauty and loneliness of the story. And the man who eventually emerged as Jesus Christ was one of a number of itinerant ministers roaming through the land at that time and who had the smallest amount of followers. Why did he survive? The others got lost. His people were then what they are now, great record keepers.
And evangelizers.
And they are also, when necessary, great record changers. And maybe some of the greatest liars under the eye of God.
Now, the first Christians we know were Africans, or the original church was first developed and had its strongest hold in Africa.
See, but the African Christian developed before the church developed as a physical body. I agree with what you're saying, but I'm saying that was not the birth of Christianity, or the African concept of Christianity, developed before the church. The church, in a physical sense, began to develop when the Romans decided they could use it, and therefore encouraged it after the Romans stopped killing Christians and began to join the church for political reasons.
They found it was more economically expedient
to
join it than to continue the expense of.
And this was when Constantine made the Christian religion of the Eastern Roman Church, and subsequently the others didn't. Plus the fact that many Roman emperors were entertaining themselves on Saturday by seeing the Christians killed, the lions and the gladiators. And finally, one Roman looked down in the arena and saw his uncle, so he didn't stop the show. He said, "Oh, he's old widow, let him." Next Saturday, he looked down, there was his wife and the child, willing to die in the arena. He said, "Stop the show and investigate this thing."
Well, Constantine's own mother, Helena, had been converted to Christianity, and that had a great impact on him making that decision. Well,
making that decision also with the little known people called the Essenes. And the Essenes were, in addition to being moralists, were vegetarians of that day. And they approached him about fornicating in the palace, and he agreed to stop that. Then they told him he had to stop eating red meat. Then he told them equivalent to go to hell with your religion. So they left him alone. So all right. If you stop the fornication, we'll leave you with your meat, So then he tolerated it enough to make it the religion of the Eastern Roman Church, although he never really, with any degree of sincerity, joined the church.
Now, St. Augustine said in one of his writings that the true religion, which had existed from the foundation of earth, came to be known as Christianity. So he very well knew.
Came to be known as Christianity.
He very well knew, obviously, that this was no new concept.
John Jackson is Christianity before Christ. Did a good job on this. Another work called Pagan Origins of the Christ Myth. John Jackson is so terribly underrated because John Jackson was a cynic and one of God's angry men, but
a man of superior intelligence.
Yeah, and a fine memory of almost everything that ever touched his life. And died an angry, disappointed man. But he was my friend for more than 50 years.
I, too, learned so much from him. I never got to meet him in person, but from his writings.
Mm-hmm.
And his writings would prick me so I would sometimes have to go for weeks just wrestling with a point of view. When I first read Man, God, and Civilization, I had to wrestle with that book, but it opened up a whole new area of enlightenment.
But see, in addition to his own writing, he introduces you to other writers that you need to investigate. Jackson introduced me to Joe Massey, Alvin Boyd Kuhn, and writers of that nature. Pro-African Europeans. The Europeans still ignore.
Now, when Constantine finally, when he decided that he was going to take this, what he considered to be a new religion, and now use it to revitalize the empire, and also use it as a mechanism to control the mind. He said the only way we can do this is to have an orthodoxy. If you have an orthodoxy, that means the people are not allowed to think or question beyond a certain level of belief. How did he go about that?
This really designating certain priests to interpret the Bible. The Bible wasn't widely read or widely circulated. The Catholic Church up until the end of the 19th century, a lot of Catholic laymen didn't even read the Bible. They had it interpreted to them, but they didn't read it. Either you had the blind faith and to believe what the priest said, or you weren't a good Catholic.
Well, I understand that in some places the Bible was chained to walls, and only certain priests could read it. Not even all the priesthood could. And you could get varying degrees of punishment if you were caught reading it, even up to death, depending upon what your station was in life. And this went on for many, many years throughout Christendom as it was dominated by the Catholic Church.
Most Christians don't know it today. Don't know the different versions it went through before it was changed. The final version it's in right now.
Well, some folks say, well, since it's gone through all this, since it's been polluted so much, what do we need with it? What can we do? Why don't we just throw it away and start all over again? Should we do that, or what should we do with it?
I think we should try to understand it as part of religious literature and mythology, but I question the intelligence of anyone who thinks the Bible is true or supposed to be true.
St. Augustine said the same thing. He said, anyone who takes the book of Genesis literally is accrediting to God those attributes that are not worthy of him.
Yeah. And most of the book of Moses was written after Moses was dead.
Now, there were men and women during closer to our times in antebellum slavery or during our captivity that went to the Bible, which had been denied them. They were not permitted to read the Bible on pain of death, actually, by their captors. But when they did get to it, when some quote-unquote well-meaning white person would teach them a text or something, they had a unique interpretation that was relative to their situation. Among them, we think of men like the Right Reverend Nat Turner and Reverend Gabriel Prosser and Denmark Vesey and Right Reverend Mother Harriet Tubman and people like that.
But then Bishop Turner at the end of Bishop Henry McNeil Turner at the end of the century.
And Henry Harlan Garnett.
Who used it as a revolutionary weapon.
So does that say we can take it now and use it as a tool for liberation?
Right now. We can use Islam the same way, if we would. But religions are authoritarian. And there's such thing as religious fascism. And some ministers have turned it into that, a way of dominating the mind and controlling the body.
But Dr. Clark, we certainly thank you for this opportunity. This has been a wonderful and enlightening session. And in closing out here, I'd like for you to just sum up in your own thoughts, feelings, and words the subject matter we have been discussing here, and share with us that which you think would help it to take us to the next stage of understanding this.
See, a discussion of religions in general, Christianity in particular, gets us into the question is, what can we use for our own liberation and the maintenance of liberation once we achieve it? And what is good for us is what brings us to that point of liberation, independence, and maintenance. When I say independence, I don't mean independent to commit crime, independence to violate morality. I mean to be free of exploitation, to be free of being demeaned, and to have the right to project yourself as a part of the totality of history. We have to restore the humane apparatus to religions that has been extracted by exploiters who have used religion the wrong way. I think we must use religion to give the world a new humanity. But we have lost the meaning unless we understand that we must first give it to ourselves, because you cannot change the world until first you change yourself. I think all religion is good depending on its application, and all have the potential of being bad, depending on its poor application. I think all of us should have the integrity to make that distinction and apply it for the good of ourselves and for all humankind, while giving each one the right to choose the interpretation that suits that particular case without demeaning that the interpretations that suit other cases for other people. I have long ago left the adherence to any form of organized religion, and I belong to an African belief system, and I am comfortable spiritually with that belief system that furnishes me the integrity and the spirituality and the support that I think I need in my life. And because this is a humane belief system, I'm not ready to deprive others of having an opinion different from me, but I'm also have the nerve to let others know that once any belief system that fails to serve the basic human needs of people and the basic protection of people is open to question, and I'm not above asking that kind of question.
In other words, you see that bringing spirituality back to religion.
Yeah, bringing spirituality back to religion, and religion will become nonpartisan and not clannish and selfish.
Thank you again, Dr. Clark. Brothers and sisters, we have just had the opportunity and the great privilege of engaging in an interview with Dr. John Henry Clark, Dean of African Synod Scholars and great African thinkers, whom we have the privilege of walking the planet with in this day and time. We pray that his work will continue to be blessed by our ancestors and by the Creator, and we pray that he will be with us for many, many years to come, because he is a great treasure to us all, greatly beloved by all of us. Thank you so much for being with us. This is a part of the ongoing series of the African origin of the Bible. Thank you again, Dr. Clark.
Okay.
This is one, I have been like a little child on his way to a candy store all day, because I had never been on camera with you. And I was really looking forward to doing it.
Okay, family, I'm gonna change over to a different video. All right.
I wanted to ask you, Mr. Fuller. I know I've heard many of your lectures and presentations, and I've read your book as well. I have never heard you use the term white privilege.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I was just wanted to ask you about that. Why you don't use that term, and if you think that is an accurate term to describe what is happening in the system of white supremacy.
Because I prefer the term white supremacy. It's more specific and it describes more. See, it's not just privilege. Privilege kind of sounds like everybody's kind of more or less got a little something going for them. Supreme means I'm really in a position of power, not just something that somebody lets me do, or that they got an option or something like that. Privilege kind of sounds that.
You see, the situation for us is that we come from the oldest people on the planet. So it is a belief, it's a thought in some Caucasians' minds. Unfortunately, those who are in power, those who have stolen people's power, it is in their minds that they must replace the old with the youngest and the newest um, biology on the planet. Since they're the youngest and the newest, the Johnny come latelys, they seek to replace us, our DNA. So the thought is that somehow, well, the whole thing is to make us a sickly people, to make us a weak people, mentally, physically, and spiritually. And they have succeeded at doing these things to our people, to us as a people. So now their idea was to replace us. So I'll finish up here.
That way. Supremacy is a stronger word. I prefer that word because it's more accurate.
Do you think white supremacy is a more accurate term to describe?
Oh, yes. Supreme, you know. It's just like the term Supreme Court. It means you can't go no further than this.
Do you
see? They don't say privilege court. Say, hey, these are supreme. When you get here, as far as the law is concerned, this is it. Once we speak, doesn't make any difference what anybody else says. White supremacists, same way. Once the white supremacists speak, the only person that can speak that would be listened to at all, or have to listen to that person, is a person who also has the title of a white supremacist.
I guess that was a short one. Hold on, family.
24 hours, the judge is expected to rule on the mask mandate in Leon County. If you lose...
Let's take that on. Go back.
I wanted to ask you, Mr.
Okay. That one was that one. Okay, on how racism got started, and then I'll look for this one. Might
Blog Talk Radio.
Greetings. This is just doing a special short version of the cows. Wanted to speak with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. about homosexual activity. I was able to speak with him privately last week, and he shared some really interesting thoughts, and I wanted him to share that with you all briefly. I didn't want to take up too much of his time. Mr. Fuller, when I spoke with you, you said that white people tend to think of non-white people as boys and girls, and you tied that into how that relates to homosexual behavior. Could you share that with our audience so they can get a really clear picture of what you're saying?
Well, there's a system of white supremacy in place, which just means this mistreatment and domination and use of people in a royalist manner based on color. That's basically what it is. That's what racism is. It's just a variation of the of royalism, but it's based on color rather than on other things like lineage and who your father was and what your name was. 1,000 years ago, and certain sets of traditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what basically racism is, and it's turned out to be the most powerful form of royalism in the known universe now, in the form of what we call racism and or white supremacy. Now, in any structure that's dominant, you have to dominate the people in all areas of activity. If you don't dominate them in all areas of activity, then other areas of activity will slip away from the domination factor. And you have 9 areas, according to what I have written, that would just about cover most things. I think that's adequate enough. Economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Now, I call sex the 8th area of activity in alphabetical order of the other areas of activity. So that just comes up as number 8. But sex is the most powerful motivating force among people, next to the system of white supremacy itself. Because whatever the dominant system is, that's what people react to on the planet. So the dominant system at this particular time in history, and has been as far back as anybody can remember who's breathing now, the dominant system. That's mistreatment of people based on color, domination of people based on color. So the sexual aspect is the second most powerful motivating force, rather than the first, under this system, since the racist factor is the dominant motivating force among people, and sexual motivations are the second. Now, the races apparently, according to the evidence, have studied how people who are subject to them are motivated sexually. Now, if a male is a boy, which you are a boy, you're a little boy when you're born and whatnot, and you get to be a bigger boy and whatnot. At a certain point, you reach what they call a certain degree of maturity, which is decided according to the social system that you have at hand. You're now entering the threshold of what they call manhood. So you go from boys to men. Females go from girls to women. And that's the normal process in most societies. So what the racists did was look at that and said, well, when you have a system of racism, you only have one man and one woman category, and that would be the masters themselves. You can't have your victims of the system growing into manhood and womanhood. So if they start trying to be men, if they go from boys to men, now you have a problem. You have a bigger problem than you had before. When they were boys, they were completely dependent on you. They understood that they'll do your bidding, and they're easier to control. Same way with the girls who are trying to be women. But when they start thinking that they are men, you're not going to have but one man in the house of white supremacy, and he's got to be white. And you're not going to have but one woman, and she has to be white. So now it defies logic that you would allow them to go from boys to men. So if you're not going to allow them to go from boys to men, what will you allow them to do? Because they are constantly growing, they're constantly getting smarter, and they have a natural tendency to want to break away from boyhood and to become men. So what you do is divert them away from wanting to become men and have, if it's a male, have him go from boyhood to femalehood. In other words,
Through
he changes his
emotions.
gender altogether, at least in his mind.
Through emotions.
Then he's easier to control. Then you do the same thing with the female. Take the black female, and rather than allow her to go the normal progression of things, steer her in the direction away from becoming a woman and in the direction of becoming a male.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, she will
Emotions.
switch genders in her mind. Now, her body didn't switch genders, but we can probably do some things that give her the illusion that her body can be made to switch genders too.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you do that, what you have is confusion. You have added confusion. And one of the best ways to control people for a long period of time, particularly if you confuse them sexually, is through confusing them sexually. So that you have a male thinking he's a female or wanting to be a female, even if he's struggling and trying and whatnot, and trying to do everything that a female does, but he doesn't have the physical equipment. But he's got it in his mind anyway. He's just determined that he's going to act like one and be one and do the things that females do, and look at males like a female looks at males normally. And then over in the female column, have the female do the same thing. Only thing about it, she's not going to try to grow into womanhood. She's going to try to do everything that she sees males doing, including in the bedroom. Try to become an artificial male. And she can do this in her mind because the mind is very flexible. A person can actually think that they are a bird if they want to. But before they try to fly or jump off a building, it's best that they get their equipment for doing so. You know. So that's the way that works. And when you can get people on that roll, and when you have people subject to you, you can always propagandize anything. You can make anything look like it's the fashion because you set the rules for the society. So that's what's going on. I tried to be as comprehensive as I possibly could in that description, and I hope that people could understand what was being said.
Yes, sir.
So that's what we have now. We're heading in that direction now, full steam ahead.
And when I spoke with you, I said that, the counter argument that I frequently hear is that, well, there are a lot of white people who are also participating in so-called homosexual activity. And, this is not something where they're just trying to trick black people into doing it. You have people who are born so-called gay or homosexual. And, this is no trick at all. If it was, you wouldn't see all these white people going around and doing it and being mistreated because they are participating in these so-called homosexual acts. What would your view on that be?
Depends on how it plays out in the end. Now, if the system of white supremacy remains intact, then that will prove the supposition just outlined. That will prove that it's valid. That it is designed basically to support what is already in place. Otherwise, you would have the system of white supremacy would go out of business. There would be no reason to keep it in business if the white people were serious about really getting rid of racism and getting rid of what they call all of the sexual and gender categories and all like that, because racism is an artificial category. See, just because people are of different colors doesn't say that they are members of a race. That's an artificial construct. No one is supposed to be a member of a race. That's something completely made up. So if you can do the same thing with gender, you can do the same thing with a lot of things. But you have to wait until it reaches a certain point where you got enough evidence to prove the proposition that you made in the first place. Now, like I say, this is my concept of the way things are going because there's still a system of racism in place. Now, if racism is still in place, when all of the so-called anti-sexual, that's what I call it, behavior comes to full fruition and everybody's accepting of it, everybody's participating in it or embracing it or parading it around and saying that it's the best thing ever discovered since ever. Okay? Now, and you still have a system of racism in place, then that will have proved the supposition because ordinarily all of racism would disappear. But see, it's designed to lure. Now, here's where I base that on, the luring part. In the history of the system of white supremacy, there's a thing called whiskey. It was very popular, the use of it. Now, if you are a practiced deceiver, one thing that you know about the science and the art of deception, you cannot deceive people into doing things unless you are doing quite a bit of it yourself. If you're going to be what you call a real arch deceiver, and the white supremacists have proven that they are arch deceivers. They are very skillful at deception. So in order to deceive people, you can't get people to drink whiskey, and you're sitting there never drinking any of it yourself.
Yep, they teach our own to be
there's some
deceptive.
historical record of this. So what they'll do, a deceiver will sit there and practice drinking whiskey under controlled conditions. Take a little sip, know exactly where the point is where you get good and drunk or where you don't get good and drunk. Then once you learn what they say, and some people brag about it in bars and whatnot, said, hey, I can drink you under the table, meaning they can outdrink you, that you will drink. I mean, that they will drink and you will drink. But when they drink, they don't get drunk. But you wind up drunk. Many males who have tried to deceive females into sexual activity, back in the days when whiskey was a bigger thing than dope, used to get into the booth in the restaurant and start that process. Say, now what I'll do, I'll know she's not willing really, but she'll be willing before the night's over because I'm going to get her to drink some of this stuff that I brought with me. And he'll be drinking and she'll be drinking. He'll take a sip, she'll take a sip. Next thing you know, she's willing to go along with anything. She doesn't know what she's doing, but he does. Now, many a person, particularly pimps, understand that thing very well. Now, it's the same way with whiskey as it was used according to the record of white supremacists themselves in dealing with people who are called Indians. Sit down, Chief. We're going to have a Thanksgiving Day. We're going to give thanks for all of the wonderful things that have been done for both me and you by our Maker, by the great spirits. And in fact, I brought some spirits with me. It's in a bottle. You never had anything like this before, but you will want it after you get it. It's called firewater. It's full of spirits. It'll give you spirits like you have never had before, Chief. And the chief said, well, what's wrong with just pure water from the river, from the great streams of our lands? Say, oh, yeah, but you never had nothing like this. This is something we made in a factory. It's got water in it. No mistake about that. Well, we got a little alcohol and a few other stuff. Little other stuff that I've added here. It'll pep you up. Give you another perspective on looking at the mountains all together. Might be good stuff. So he gives it to the chief. And at the same time now, the chief is a little suspicious. So he's drinking right along with the chief. So that means everything must be okay. So he's drinking, I'm drinking. Next thing you know, the chief is under the table. Chief's not used to it. And the white supremacist, while he's drunk, or when he begins to come out of the stupor, says, okay, Chief, I got some paper here I want you to sign. I'm going to give you 22 bucks in Manhattan.
Deceptive.
Now, when the chief really gets sober, see, now he's angry. He wants to go on the warpath. But he's already signed everything away. And what was the instrument for doing it? Deception through an act of using whiskey. Now, the whiskey, that's working all over the world and they're starting to do it in South Africa, in Thailand, and other places and whatnot, is sex and anti-sex. Oh, you don't need to be a female all the time. After all, females have to go through a lot of agony. Wouldn't you like to be like your brother? Well, I don't have the equipment of my brother. Oh, well, you can pretend that you have it. I got some stuff I can sell you in the store. Strap-ons, you name it. And you just get it in your head that you should be a male. Because males can get things done. They got privileges that females don't have.
They're vicious.
You say, well, I don't particularly, the lady says, I don't particularly want to be a male and all like that. Well, there's something, have you tried it? You don't know it. Don't knock it if you ain't tried it. And knowing black people, particularly in this area of the world, we like anything that looks like it's bordering on something new. Because we're so tired of everything that ain't new. And they will know we'll go for it. We'll pioneer, we'll lead the parade, which is what they try to get us to do. Now, you can't get a decent place to stay. You can't get a decent job. But if you want to lead the gay parade and you're black, they will reserve a spot for you.
And you won't get into the LGBTQ, but they'll certainly allow you to be an influencer of your own people.
Of what I'm talking about. The record shows this. And they start with who? The youngest. Okay. Always work with them in the choir and churches and whatnot. And they do it through the most intelligent of black people. You don't start with the fellow sitting there with the wine bottle in front of the liquor store who's 40 years old. Because he's a black male. That's why he's drinking. He's been disallowed to ever be a man, and he knows he'll never be one. He'll always be a boy. And that is tearing him up inside. That's why he left his wife, left his children, and all like that. I mean, he gave up on everything and started drinking. That's why he's sitting on the curb out there. Because he's still struggling to be a man, and he will fight people right there in that parking lot about his manhood. So you can't hardly get to him, even when he's drunk.
It's been reduced to an
You
animal.
say, oh man, get away from me. Don't be feeling on me. I got this big hip woman out here, this big leg woman out here, if I want to do something like that, that's who I'm gonna get with. I don't want you. Get your old rough, dirty hands off of me, Man, I like women, I'm a man, I'm a man. Look at me, I'm a man, I don't want no man. Even when I was in the joint, I didn't want one. See, that's the way he'll talk. He's 40 years old. Okay? So what do? They go around and get the teachers and the guys who are going into the ministry. And that's where they spread that gospel among black intellectuals. Because the street dude, see, he's still struggling. I mean, he ain't going to never make it because you can't be a man under the system of white supremacy. You got to remain a boy or turn into a female. By turning into a female, I mean having the kind of ideas about the opposite sex that a female has, but you're a male. But you got the same idea about a male as your sister has. You're trying to outdo her. You're trying to take your sister's boyfriend. That's the way the white supremacists want it.
My co-host, I believe is here. She is a non-white female, and she is 10 years old. But she has been studying your work, and she understands that there is a system of racism, white supremacy. I was hoping she could ask some questions as well. Are you there, Justice?
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Did you? Sorry about the misunderstanding. If
No
did
problem.
you? Okay.
Do you have some questions you would like to ask Mr. Fuller?
Not at this moment.
Okay.
Well, she can think about what I said. See, here again, codification is about not taking Neely Fuller's word for anything. In fact, you're not supposed to. You're supposed to just walk around and take a look. So you just don't jump into things. Just walk around and take a look and see if it doesn't start adding up. Because that's what I do. I don't jump to a conclusion and then go around trying to bombard people with the conclusion I jump to. I just go around and see if there's evidence of what I think might be happening. In fact, I challenge, you might say, if you want to use that term, I say question, and it's not a challenge. If I have a concept, I'll go around and question the concept that I have before I even reveal it. And see, well, something is going on. Now, why is this happening? Why here? Why now? How come it wasn't happening, 60 years ago? Why is it happening now? And why is it happening involving black people on this scale? See what I mean? And I'm saying now, someone must have thought it up, or it wouldn't be happening, because it's something that's happening between people. And anything that black people do, the white supremacists always have something to do with it. Otherwise, it's not going to be happening in the first place. If it's something that's bad for their business, they will cut it off. They'll put a stop to it. But if it's something that they think is good for their business, they'll not only let it roll, they will support it. Now, I've heard white supremacists argue about white people engaging in what we call homosexuality or gayism or lesbianism and whatnot. And that's another thing, even the terms don't add up. Because I've even asked the questions, which is what you do in any kind of research. Why are gay people called gay? Nobody answers that. Is it named after a person, Mr. Frank Joshua J. Gay, or what? Who started it? Or who promoted it? Who had an organization by that name, and it was named after him? I can see that. But it just, all of a sudden, gay. What does that mean?
Sounds
and then you say
devilish to
gays
me.
and lesbians. Then you add another one, transgender. Gays, it started off just being gays, then lesbians, then transgender. So one legitimate question is, where's the cutoff point? See what I mean? And another thing, is a lesbian gay? Why do you say gays and lesbians? I mean, these are just questions, logical questions.
Right.
If you got a big sign out and you're carrying it around and telling everybody to join in and support it and contribute some money to it and all like that, people should know what they're contributing money to. And another thing, where's the payoff? Now, if it's an improvement over what we call traditional sex, because they call it alternative, that's another term. This is a alternative, meaning something that's different from the usual, or something that's a variation of the basic. Well, then you ask several questions there. Well, is there anything incorrect about the basic? And a person might say no, but this is an alternative, of course, for people who just got tired of the basics, want to do something different. What's wrong with variety? What's wrong with diversity? Diverting from one thing to another. Well, maybe nothing, but let's examine it. Examine it for what? To see if it is an improvement over what you already had. And if so, justify it by showing, by example, where's the improvement? Which one of these? See, when you start talking about homosexuality or lesbianism, these are not just abstract words. These are talking about you have to do certain things to qualify. So what are these things that you do? And which one of them is an improvement over what has been done? That's just like a person might come around and say, well, hey, I used to kind of be attracted to people, I've had several wives and all like that. Even had a little incest, every now and then, but I finally came to the conclusion that people ain't where it's at all. I'm in the bear. You say, what do you mean you in the bear? I'm into bear. I go out in the woods and I chase me down a bear. The bear ain't chasing me no more. I'm chasing them. I have found that that's a wonderful alternative. After all, man, let's face it. Look at these marriages and divorces and whatnot. I don't have no trouble with the bears. I used to didn't think of anything about bears except just going to the ball game, But I found out that, man, if you really snuggle up to a bear, you'll never want to go back doing nothing else. Now, where'd you get that idea? Well, it just came to me one night. Tired of these women. In fact, people was telling me, well, if you don't like women, get you a man. Well, I'm tired of them too. So I'm in the bear. See, now you might laugh, but it's going to come to that if it ain't already. Because there are some people into that. Yeah, they call it, what do they call it? Bestiality?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, see, that might be a wholesale thing. In about another 10 years, they say, well, hey, this gay and lesbian thing about played out, man, ain't where it's at. Man, everybody's trying to preserve the bears now. I'm trying to get me a panda. Now, what is the point that I'm making? It's lots of things that the mind can do. The mind is extremely inventive and extremely flexible. But the basic question is this type of activity an improvement? And if so, why? Otherwise, why are you coming around asking black people who don't even have a roof over their head that this is what they should be pushing now? They don't even have a
Yeah.
decent school, a decent job. But now you want them to join the gay rights movement.
Yeah. That's something deep to think about. How can anyone in our race think about sexuality and the struggle with sexuality when you haven't even overcome the struggle of just being able to be free and exist as a being in this place? You don't have, I mean, you can't even, you're not in a place where your food is the way it's supposed to be, which is on trees and in gardens. You can't really, it's hard to get land if you're black. It's even hard to get a house, home. So, and then when you do, you're going to get tricked and maybe taken advantage of. Predatory lending. Um, it's just, you got to think people are not in a God state, so they don't know themselves or they're not aware of who they are, what they are, why they are, or aware of the world around them. So they just live thinking, and this is where I come into the concept about the white people being sheep and we're following them. Because they too are going to a slaughter because the devil doesn't care about nothing. All he cares about is power. So the one that is empowered and in control of the masses, if we're following them and we're going by everything that's dealing with them and we're allowing ourselves to be under their leadership, then we too would be following the white sheeps to the slaughter because nothing is really benefiting us there, here, with in their society. Hey, Yusuf.
And that should be their priority. We should drop everything else and make that a priority. I don't see the justification at all. They have some white people who came around years ago and started calling it the rainbow. You know, kind of, you might excuse the pun, tailgating Jesse Jackson's rainbow push for civil rights. And then they got to saying, well, what is this all about? And when the question was asked, they answered by saying, well, it's another division of civil rights. Yeah. It's all the same thing. Discriminating against gays
Thank
is
you
the
for
same
being here,
discriminating
Yusuf.
against blacks. And a lot of black people say, wait a minute, it may sound like the same thing, but it ain't the same thing. But they were able to shout all of that down. It is the same thing. Why is it the same thing? Because I said so. White supremacy in action again. Always because I said so. See, but that don't, it sounds like it could be right, but it's something that still don't add up. It ain't the same thing. It is the same thing. Trust me. No different. Discrimination is discrimination, which is another word that people should pay attention to. Everybody discriminates every day. You discriminate when you decide to ride the bicycle to work rather than catch the bus. And does that say that you're discriminating against the bus riders? So that word discrimination, I don't even use it because everybody discriminates. It just means choosing. But what is the key? The key is it a choice that's constructive? When you start talking about black people's plight now, that's a different thing altogether. Is it constructive or is it non-constructive? Because it's got to be one or the other. Is it an improvement? Now, we already have a mess with the male-female thing. But you would have that anyway under any system that's unjust. But now, are you making a bigger mess, or are you straightening out all the mess that ever was? I have no reason to believe that this is helping to straighten out anything. It's helping to make it worse, particularly when you start doing it right down to the grade school level. Start saying that this is something that this is just what you children need. You're 7 years old, and this is what I need. I don't even know what sex is yet. Now you're telling me about alternatives to sex. Well, let's start out so that your mind will get straight. Now, Jane has 2 mommies, thinking about getting 3. Now, what benefit is this to Jane? Well, she learns diversity at an early age. Diverting from what to what in order to do what? Oh, well, we'll know when we get there. Don't ask so many questions. Oh, no. I got a lot of questions. Show me how this is a what? Improvement. Which one of these acts? See? Well, being gay. Don't you understand what being gay used to mean? Being happy. I mean, but that ain't what it means, I don't think, when you say it. So you're talking about acts. Show me by demonstration the very act that you're talking about that's going to be an improvement. And then tell me in words how this is a great improvement. Tell me, First do the act with me looking at you. And then after you finish the act, you'll say, now that's act 1 of being gay. You ain't gay unless you do this. See, there's several things you can do to qualify for being gay. So you got to have qualifications. Otherwise, what's the difference between you and everybody else? If you don't do something different. So you got to do something. So whatever that difference is, you do it. Then you get come to the blackboard with the pointer and whatnot, and you say, now, number 1, this is an improvement over whatever it is you all are doing out there. It's not just an alternative. And I'm telling you this because you should be on board for supporting act number 1, which I just demonstrated to you. This is what you actually ask people to do. See, in other words, stop just talking in circles and whatnot, and talking in innuendo. Get the crowd there to come and take their seats respectfully, and then march down the aisle and come up to the podium and have your bed up there or whatever it is you're supposed to have, and do what it is that you say that everybody should be taking an interest in and supporting. And then as you do it, you can turn around and face the crowd every now and then. Just take a little break. Say, now you saw what we just did. Now, this is an improvement over what has been because of, and then enumerate the improvements and ask for questions and answers. Because if I'm in the audience, I'm going to say, now, how is that an improvement? I just saw what you did from start to finish. I sat here and watched it for 15 minutes until you completed it. Didn't say a word. Now I want you to tell me how that's an improvement over what? I think that what I'll hear is silence. But I don't know. See, because they never get that far. They just go around and say, support us. And if you don't support us, oh, you're some kind of demon. You're some kind of anti-something. No, just explain what you're doing. I mean, like the chief. I don't know about that fire water. How is that going to improve me? How is that going to be an improvement over water? Say, well, didn't you get a little buzz when you... Yeah, I got a little buzz and all like that, but is it an improvement? Say, well, didn't the mountains look like you saw 2 of them instead of 1? Wouldn't you like to have an extra mountain? Well, an extra mountain might help, but that's not really what I was looking at. I thought I was. Well, Chief, that's what whiskey does. It makes you drunk. Well, is being drunk an improvement over being sober? Well, if you work at it, see how they talk? And they do the same thing with sex.
Again, I missed it.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sorry. Yeah,
Right.
I was going to see if Justice, if she had any questions she would like to ask Mr. Fuller.
Okay.
Justice, are you there?
Hello?
Okay, we can hear you. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I don't have any questions right now.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's why I'm saying. See, if they don't have any questions, there's no problem there. All I want them to do, I have said what I had to say. I just want them to think about it. After they think about it and think about it thoroughly, they may come to the conclusion that nothing that I said made sense. In which case, they can go ahead with whatever they think is they hear somebody else say. But I think that anything, particularly something that's supposed to be new or you're expanding on something that's old, should be examined. Somebody comes to me and says, Fuller, you need to quit this job. I mean, it's a better job over there in that other town and whatnot. Now, I'm willing to listen, but we're gonna have to take a weekend and go over there and have me take a look at that job. See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I ain't gonna just sign off and whatnot. I mean, go in there and cuss the boss out and quit, and then go running off to the other job. I mean, when I haven't even looked into it, I'm just asking people to take a look and see where all this goes. And when I say take a look, I don't mean just a short look, because this is pretty big stuff. You take a good long look before you go plunging in, okay? Because there's an old saying, if you snore in a bear's face long enough, you'll learn to like it. But bear might not be where it's at. You might get to the place where you can't bear it. But it'll be too late. Because now you're hooked. Just like the chief got hooked on that whiskey. Ask any Indian about whiskey. And ask his whiskey a friend to the Indian. But when they first got it, it looked like it was a friend. He no longer felt the cold. I laid out in the snow all night last night, Maybe the white man got it right. I didn't feel nothing. I woke up with a smile on my face. And I wanted some more, It destroyed him. This thing that the white supremacists are doing with sexuality and bringing it to black people, beware.
I agree wholeheartedly. I especially started paying attention to that when I was seeing so many different black so-called stars, black people who have a lot of money, are well known.
Oh yeah, those are the ones you get first. Yeah, and then have them finance what you're doing to them.
Yes, sir. I have noted the white people who allege to be against racism, white supremacy, so-called anti-racist.
Exactly.
A lot of them, they will talk about what they call white privilege, and then with that, they will talk about people who are not gay, that they're also privileged, and that you have mistreatment of people because they are a person of color, and then you have mistreatment of people who do not engage in heterosexual behavior. And how do you feel that plays into the system of white supremacy?
Well, for one thing, they'll take antidotes. That's one thing they'll always do. You can always find an antidote. In other words, an example. Some black person who is so-called gay or homosexual, lesbian, whatever it is, gets beat up, maybe gets killed. Okay? Many people get killed every day for something or another. But the way you looked at me, so I'm going to kill you. People get killed about that. Okay? So you can always find an example. But what they'll do, they'll just sit back and wait for someone to pick out somebody who's homosexual and beat them up because they are homosexual. Okay? Well, basically, these are people that go around and beat up people, period. They don't need much excuse. They're just looking for somebody to beat up. All right? See, so that's not unusual. But here's how shrewd the so-called white supremacist arm of the gay rights movement is. They know that's going to happen. And then when it does happen, they'll say, see, that doesn't happen all day, every day. In fact, where it comes to black people.
And the game is with our children now. The game of chess is with our children. Like you said, Emmanuel Briggs says, definitely the same. And Yusuf also said, definitely the same in 2021. White supremacists are playing chess, not checkers. They're definitely doing these things to knock our men off the board, to, of course, like I said, destroy us and weaken us physically, mentally, and spiritually, so that they can come in and take our place, and take, like they've been doing all the time that we're here, taking our places. But once our people recognize that we're the ones that are going to save us from this tyranny, this debauchery, then we can start acting and being accordingly. Within what, once they're aware of where we're at and what we're dealing with, and start foreseeing ahead of time what is coming at us. I have to say, I saw the pattern of them messing with our children, getting desperate to steal our children out of our arms. And pushing us and influencing us into all kinds of self-destructive activities. Polite was an influence. He was put there to influence. So was Dr. York, was put there to influence. People followed it's a lot of people following entertainers on social media because they have a huge influence upon the occult, the culture. And one has to decide if they want that kind of influence or not, because you don't know who you're dealing with.
Most black people, it's been my experience, coming up in the South, the black male, and I knew some of them, the white supremacists would find out that this black male is a homosexual. That's who he'd hire. The black male who is looking at females, when he comes over there to get hired at the white hotel, no, we don't want you around here. Absolutely not. But we'll take this black male here who likes for people to take him into the men's room, other males, we'll put him behind the desk, and give him a promotion and everything. And other white people will come in there and say, what is that Negro doing behind that desk and whatnot? I thought this was a white hotel and whatnot. Yeah, but check him out. He's no danger. He's a plaything. He's all fun and games because he doesn't want to be a man. So you got no threat ever to him. He's no problem. And I have seen that over and over again. Because I used to wonder about some guys being able to get jobs where they're not even supposed to be. The old jobs, where Hey, some white guys couldn't get the job, but he got a black elevator operator over in that building. Yeah, because you see, you got white men who will service it. He's giving service to. That's just another branch of the service. Okay? Now, the black guy who comes in there looking at the white women, see, hey, yeah, if he's lucky, in the first place, he ain't going to get the job. And sometimes if he does, he might wind up swinging from a tree. Okay? So then that told me something. That was before I got out of my teens. I started learning that. There are some black males who wasn't even homosexuals, but they acted effeminate. And they were accepted by white people. They could sit there, sit around the table and whatnot, as long as they were talking girl talk and whatnot. Talking about how you fix your hair and all this type of stuff. Hey, they're all right. And you can notice that today.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Black male in the office, who kind of tips around and he might not even be a homosexual, but he has what most people would call feminine ways. Obvious feminine ways. Not all people who believe in homosexuality have obvious feminine ways, but some people who are not even homosexual, on the surface, they have high-pitched voices. They don't have that deep voice like some black people have. All right. But they talk, in a real high-pitched voice, and they're always smiling and always tipping, and switching. They switch more than the females, okay, when they walk. Very acceptable, I just give an example. He talks like, have you all been to coffee? Stretch out that last word. Coffee? Coffee, anyone? A male who talks like that? Oh, yeah. See, white people notice him. They pay attention to him. They know he's black. They see he's black. Hey, but hey, he's okay. He ain't no danger. He's a little cutesy plaything.
Definitely not a man.
Right. He ain't trying to be no man, so he ain't no threat. Nothing. He's no danger to the system of white supremacy. That's the bottom line. Back in the ancient days, what they used to do to make sure, they'd make eunuchs out of them, meaning they'd castrate them. Then they'd dress them up in a big gold suit, put a big turban on their head, and they'd stand them outside of what they call the harem, or the concubine room of whoever the ruler was. And he was the guard. See, they'd let him mingle with the girls in there all the time. He'd be the only male in there. What had been a male, but he's castrated. He got no equipment at all. But he got big, strong shoulders. He can whip anybody, And his job is to keep other males from coming in there. Black as he can be. Got a big gold turban on. Big, expensive. We got plenty of bling bling. Well, they put bling bling all over it. He's a walking showpiece. Got some gold shoes turned up at the end. Great big red sash around his waist. That's his full-time job. Stopping people at the door. What are you doing in here? You don't have no business in here. There's naked women in here. They all belong to the king. They belong to the emperor. My job is to keep you out of here. Get on away from here. Or I slash you with this sword. But he's got no sex organs. They call them eunuchs. The palace eunuch. Now that's actual history.
I wanted to ask you, excuse me, we're going to have a white person come on the program later today. She's a professor at the University of Southern California. She wrote a book on white supremacy. It's called What Blood Won't Tell. And she basically, she analyzes how the white people who practice racism, how they have changed the rules about who gets to be a white person, and even what rules they're going by, that they've changed those. And one of the things that she highlights is that to be a white person, you are expected to be informed about racism. You are expected to know the rules of how you are supposed to function as it relates to other white people and non-white people. That is just expected of you. You cannot be ignorant of those rules. I had heard you say that white people cannot be ignorant about racism. And if you are, you will get in trouble with other white people. Could you share your view on that?
The average white person, about the time they're 16 years old, they know all the rules. They picked it up by osmosis, meaning just by being around people and observing and listening and whatnot, being around the dinner table and all like that when political talk is going on. You know, the little white girl, the little white boy who's sitting there, I mean, he's 6 years old, but he hears, his white grandfather sitting up there talking about that blankety blank Obama and whatnot, and all the rest of those heathen niggas are ruining, the society and all like that, and on and on and on. Now, he's 6 years old. About the time he's 15, he's well schooled, and he hadn't said a word to anybody. He's, by the time he gets ready to go to school, he knows the fundamentals. And by the time he gets to about the 8th or 9th grade, he's got it just about pat. Now, every now and then he'll make some mistakes. He'll choose a white buddy or something a black buddy or something like that. I mean, he'll be on the football team and all like that. But for the most part, he knows the rules. He knows where the line is. And he's not supposed to cross it. Because when he does, he'll be crossing his grandfather. Who's still sitting on that porch rocking back and forth. Now, boy, you know better than that. It's okay, you be nice and kind to the people. Don't call them names and all like that. But after all, don't forget, you're a white man now. You got to remember that. That means something. I didn't go all the way through the wars and all like that fighting for you to wind up being like them. It's all right for you to be around them and do a little laughing and talking and all like that, but you're a different species all together, and don't you forget it. How do you think that we got all that we got? By being like them? Look at them. Look at them. Drive through where they live. Look at the way they act. Do you think that's an improvement? And so, they stand there and look, and then they go out and check it out. And they say, no, I'd rather, hey, there's something to being white. You get a lot of things out of being white that you won't get if you're black.
For sure.
Yeah, see, so they say that. I mean, they ain't blind, Are you in a better position being white? Are you in a better position being black? Anywhere in the world. And every white person is, a 30-year-old white person, they don't know that. Even if they are blind, they know that much. I mean, a blind white person doesn't even know what a black person looks like. If somebody's told him he's white, he knows what that means. That's a much better position, because he's listening. He got ears.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had one person that called in. I want to see if they had any questions. Before I do, I want to check Justice. Do you have any questions you would like to ask Mr. Fuller? Are you there, Justice? We didn't lose her. If you're there, you
Hello?
Putting everybody
I'm here.
to sleep.
Hello?
I don't think so. They're listening in the chat. We can hear you, Justice. Go ahead if you have a question that you would like to ask.
Yes. How can the system of white supremacy be stopped?
First of all, by having the thing, that's why I call what I write the compensatory code. Compensatory means making up for what's missing. And you assume that what's missing is something that should be, other than something that what you have. What you have is a system of racism. Now, what's the best system for replacing the system of racism? Well, you look at what racism does. It's a form of injustice. So you do just the opposite. Try to come up with a system that's a system of justice. Meaning what? Guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. It's a very simple, fundamental thing. And that's all you have to remember. And then everything that you do, each and every day, wherever you are, you try to do the best you can to fulfill those guarantees. The person who is being mistreated doesn't get mistreated. If you see it, you speak up. First of all, by asking a question. Is this person being mistreated? And if so, how? Because it appears that the person is being mistreated. And if not, why not? Because you're looking at what's happening. And you just raise a question to the people who are around, who are causing what you perceive to be the mistreatment. And in order to minimize conflict and get into a big fight with them, you just say, is this the way a person is supposed to be treated? And then let them answer. Is this what I'm looking at? Is this the way that a person is supposed to be treated? And let the person who you perceive to be doing the mistreatment answer. And if the person says yes, then you say, why? If this is the way a person is supposed to be treated, why? What's the reason? And last but not least, is this the way you want to be treated? The way that you are treating this person right now, do you want to be treated this way? Do you want everybody in this room to start treating you the same way? And everybody in every other room, everywhere you go, for the rest of your life? You know what I mean? Hold the phone a minute.
Yes, sir. Just a spontaneous episode of Context of White Supremacy. I had the ability to contact Mr. Fuller and decided to do so. Justice was able to join in. This is, I guess, the warm-up for our show at 7 p.m. today, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Are you with us again, Mr. Fuller? Oh, I guess it's still on, yeah. This is the warm-up show for our...
now, the other part of that, Justice, hello, I broke into your conversation.
Go right ahead, sir.
So the other part of that is you have to guarantee that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. That's the compensatory definition. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
That's the compensatory definition for justice, which loosely means balance between people. People are out of balance all over this planet, 24/7. Why? Mostly because of mistreatment, and the biggest form of mistreatment is racism. Because there's more conflict between white and non-white than any other type of conflicts, including so-called religious conflicts, that there are. This is why racism is so deadly. It's the major form of conflict. It's the one that most people do the most hand-wringing about. Just like the lady asked, what do you do about it? That's what people have been asking ever since it began. Because it seems to be so complicated. People who have a lot of brain power haven't figured out, how do you handle this? Where do you start? What's the best way to go about doing something about it? I mean, the brainiest people in the world who have been sincere have approached it and walked away throwing up both hands. That means if a person really wants to be a superstar on this planet, figure out what to do about racism. I mean, some person who really wants, they pride themselves on what you call solving problems. You know, there are some people who walk around and say, hey, hand me a problem. I can solve any problem there is. Because I know how to work on problems. Hand them the race problem. And see in about maybe 6 months, they'll probably walk away talking to themselves. Now, these are people who are rocket scientists, all right? They think that they can figure out anything. Just give them the race problem. Tell them to figure that one out. Yeah.
Right on. You have some other questions you would like to ask Justin?
All right.
Yes.
Go right ahead.
How does the system of white supremacy harm non-white people directly and indirectly?
I didn't hear the question.
Hello?
How did what? Hello. How did what? I can hear you, but
okay. How does the system?
Well, maybe I didn't understand the question. Go ahead. Say it again.
How does the system of white supremacy harm non-white people directly and indirectly?
Did you understand the question?
Yes, sir. I believe she said, how does the system of white supremacy harm non-white people directly and indirectly?
Oh, in every area of activity, because it's harmful. Now, it's one thing about the system of white supremacy. It's very efficient when it comes to producing things. It's the most productive system ever thought of in the history of recorded history for getting things done. You want to get things done, you can definitely adopt the system of white supremacy when it comes to handling material things. You can get a lot done through the system of white supremacy. You can get it done swiftly and efficiently. But that being the fact, the other part of it is, it's also designed in the process of getting things done, it's deliberately designed to destroy millions of people in the process. But you accomplish a lot. But it's a lot of dead people on the factory floor when you finish. And that's how it harms non-white people. They come under that onslaught. Now, a lot of non-white people, well, not a lot,
Exactly.
but a few compared to the number that's dead on the factory floor. A few benefit. Just like in any slave system, which is basically what it is. The system of racism is just a form of slavery. That's all it is, based on color. You mistreat people. Any type of mistreatment is slavery. Anytime you're being mistreated, you're a slave. I don't care who you are or where you are. See, the word slavery has just been kind of confined to a certain ritual that you go through. No, mistreatment is slavery. If you are subject to any kind of mistreatment, you are a slave at the time that you are subject to that. And sometimes a person is just, a slave for 15 minutes. Because they're being mistreated for 15 minutes. And when the 15 minutes is over, they're no longer a slave. But if you're a non-white person on the planet under a system of white supremacy, you are a slave as long as you are under that system. And that's pretty awesome. So if a white person is being mistreated by another white person for 24 hours, it means that white person was a slave for 24 hours. But after the 24 hours, they got away from the situation. Not a slave anymore. But they can say, truthfully, that they were a slave for 24 hours. If you are kidnapped and beaten. Yes, go ahead.
Hello. Next time, okay?
Justice, did you have a question?
I want it to be great next time, for real. And they're going to be all right, right?
I think that's the person that called in.
All right, don't knock on the door anymore. Yeah, great.
Yeah, that was the person that called in. Sorry about that. If you can continue with your response. Sorry about that, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, no problem. But I'm trying to, give examples and all like that. So, because in counter-racist codification, everything should be very clear for a very logical reason. Racist, if you're going to have a system of racism, one thing you have to do is not make things clear. You have to be confusing. You have to use confusing terms. You have to say one thing and do another. You have to be deceptive. Otherwise, you can't maintain the system except by brute force. And brute force has been proven on an ongoing basis with no break. Just simply doesn't work. The system will break down somewhere along the line.
Mm-hmm.
So,
did y'all know, family, that it's the most racist people that usually try to come amongst you? I don't know why, but I was on bingo, and there was this white girl who would always be on his brother's channel on his bingo page, and she would the way she talked and her demeanor and the expression on her picture alone just told me that she was racist. And the fact that she wanted to be in that vicinity, you have to question, why is she so interested in being amongst us? We don't know that to their society, we think things change. So we don't know that they look down on us. And the only reason they would want to come among us is to cause dissension, to cause conflicts, to cause issues, for her to say she's better than Black female, or to be there and prove herself to be better. Because that's what the situation was. So we'll continue.
if you want a smooth running system of mistreatment of any kind, you have to be a very deceitful person. Deception works on a long-term basis, because then you're not always arguing and fighting with people. They're on automatic. People who are deceived will be on automatic. They'll think that they're doing what they should be doing and going about doing it the way that it should be done, because they're deceived. So they'll do it on their own. You don't have to watch them or beat them with a whip. You don't have to go looking for them to check on them. They'll just be on automatic, because you have now, through deception, made them into robots. You don't have to watch a robot once it's been trained. It's like a dog. See, if you haven't trained your dog, you got to stay right there with that dog. Otherwise, the dog will break loose and this might do anything. But if you train the dog, now you can go to sleep, because the dog will know exactly what to do. Go sit by the door and stay there until you tell it to move. It's the same way when you subject a person to slavery or to racism, which is just a form of slavery, because it's mistreatment. You just train them to accept the mistreatment and actually think that the mistreatment is excellent treatment.
Exactly.
Now you got it. You got a perfect situation.
Exactly. That's why they have sex with our brothers. That's why females want to have
Just,
sex with
do
our
you have
brothers.
some more
That's
questions
why
you would like
males
to
want
ask?
to have sex with other females. That's why they want a
Not
sexual
not at
relationship
this
with
moment,
us,
thank you.
period.
Okay.
because they practice
is one person who called in.
bestiality.
Caller, your line is showing up as 111. Did you have a question you would like to ask Mr. Fuller?
Yes, I apologize for earlier. I was actually trying to put the kids to bed, and I didn't want them to bother me while I was going to make the comment, and you recorded the whole thing. So
no problem.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't hear the whole thing from the beginning, but I kind of came in when Mr. Fuller was talking about the whole gay, feminine men in history. And my name is the Gay Mentor. That's my show name on here. And I was just curious, his perspective of minority gay females or lesbians, or does he feel like since they're females, it's kind of the opposite, that maybe Caucasian men or men in general heterosexual men might feel intimidated, or, is there an issue, or is it, do they get away with a little bit more? Do we get away with a little bit more because we are females, and maybe we, less people are intimidated by us? I was just, curious about your perspective on that. And then I also had another comment, but I didn't know if you wanted me to kind of question. I don't know if you want me to wait till you answer that one.
Could I ask if you're a white person or a non-white person?
I am half black, half Puerto Rican. My mom, she's, was a Black Panther when she was younger, natural afro, and just real down-to-earth person. And my dad, born in Puerto Rico, that type of thing.
And non-white.
Right, non-white. But my
godmother... According to the white supremacists, you would be non-white.
Right, absolutely.
You'd be in the non-white category.
Yes. But once you answer this question, I was gonna tell you a little brief experience, and I wanted your comment on that.
All right. You have a brief experience of what kind?
Well, did you want to answer? Yeah, it's something totally different. It has to do with kind of like race relations. So I don't know if you want to address the.
Oh, okay. Well, no, I'll deal with the first. I'll deal with it like I will deal with it in the order that you want me to do it. So your first question was. Hello?
Oh, okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please.
What was our first question?
Was the question, do you think, Mr. Fuller, do you think that non-white females or so-called lesbian females, do you think they might get more privileges or get away with doing more than a non-white male, since the white supremacists might not consider a non-white female or a lesbian non-white female, they might not consider them to be as big a threat than a non-white male? Was that the question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In some instances. See, it depends on what the white supremacists want to do. See, that's the part that has to be yet to be studied when this whole thing plays out. They have an agenda. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they wouldn't be proposed, or they wouldn't be spreading it all over Africa and whatnot.
No, I'm sorry. What did
you mean? The white supremacists are all. Hello. Go ahead.
Okay, what were you talking about all over Africa? I was trying to get a perspective, like, how would you perceive my life? Would you feel like, I was, I have more privilege, like you were talking about some of the gay black men had more privilege in history than some of the other Caucasian men, because they were less intimidating to the white supremacists. And I was asking, as a female, not a male, lesbian, minority, do you feel like possibly we might be the very, very bottom of the tier as far as subjected to all sorts of prejudice from all sorts of directions, from racism to, sexism to being gay and all that type of stuff? Or do you feel like we're not as intimidating as maybe some other groups?
Well, see, that's what I mean by evidence. See, we don't. You won't know that really, nor will I, until you actually experience pressure from whatever source. Okay? Then you will know, because that pressure will have come about because the white supremacists have determined that that's where it's going to go. See, they will make that decision if you are in the non-white category. All right? And it has been my observation that the white supremacists consider anyone who say that anybody in their family is black. They came before them, and because Puerto Rican is not a color. See, so what the white supremacists do?
I don't really. To be honest with you, I'll just get into my next point, so you probably get a better idea where I'm coming from. I was in the military, and I was stationed on a small ship that had a wide variety of people. People who weren't even American citizens on this boat, and on this ship. And I would say ratio-wise, because of course there were far more Caucasians in there than minorities or blacks or whatever, Asians. I would have to say, in all honesty, that a lot of the minorities, ratio-wise, gave me more problems than a lot of the Caucasian people. Now, I'm not saying that a lot of those Caucasian people who didn't give me problems were not racist. I can't label certain people, but what I'm saying is, wouldn't it be just wiser in life just to judge people as individuals, see how they treat you, and then you decide based off of their actions what type of person this person is, because you never know. I mean, there might be white people. I know there are. I'm sure racism will probably exist as long as I'm alive. But I believe there are white people who generally want to help other non-white people. I'm not saying depend on them. I'm just saying be aware of, whatever your environment is and the type of people you're dealing with.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. What you are describing right now, like the ship that you were on and all like that, that's exactly the way that the white supremacists want it. Because what you were describing is confusion.
I'm not going to disagree with that.
Huh?
I'm not going to disagree with that.
You said you do disagree with that?
I will not disagree with that.
Oh, okay. Well, now, what you were looking at on that ship, because a ship is an excellent place. See, they experiment on ships.
Oh, listen, I'm not gonna disagree with that either. You should listen to one of my shows.
Yes, see, I mean, a ship is a laboratory for experience. The slave ships themselves were laboratories of experimentation. So by the time they got to land, they had already worked out how a lot of things are going to work, because they had a captive audience. They had a captive clientele. It's something about being isolated on the water.
Okay, but okay, and then I'll get to a general. I mean, your ideas are very interesting, and honestly, when you were talking about the whole gay men and certain positions, I didn't live during that time, but that sounds.
What she is describing and talking about is what I've been talking about and explaining about multiculturalism and how they wanted us in that situation. And Neely Fuller is explaining why they want us in this situation that we are in, for confusion.
Sounds very interesting. But ultimately, despite all the horrific experiences I had while in the military, right now I am benefiting from that experience, and I don't feel like I'm experiencing racism through that system. But I feel like it's because I spent a lot of time doing a lot of research, and I don't know if it's true that I'm doing 10 times more than a white person next to me, but I know I spend a lot of time looking out for me. You know what I mean? And then I also look out for other people, but not like as a black or white thing. It's like as a veteran, as a gay person, as a black person, as an individual. You know what I mean? Like anybody who's with it. I'm not out here to support hate. When I joined the military, I didn't join the military because I wanted to bomb other countries. I mean, I was one of those people that were looking for benefits at a young age, and I got it. I got it. And,
sure.
And so, you know what I mean? But and listen, I did experience racism and sexism and more than that there, okay? And I'm not denying that. And I'm not saying that, and I do, like you said, experiment. Yes, I felt that way. I felt like the ship was like a small world experiment. You know what I mean? Like just everybody put in that little, little boat of experimenting on society. But
now hold it right there. Hold it right there. If you could perceive that at a subliminal level,
at 18 through 22, yes.
That's what I'm saying. The white supremacists didn't discover this. The white supremacists set it up because that's what they were doing. They are experimenting to see what people will. They have done this as far back as the beginning of racism. They know what kind of setups they can have where they can steer people into thinking whichever way they want people to think. They are masters at this. These are not things that happen by accident. That's what I'm saying. They know that under certain conditions, a ghetto, for instance, or a shanty town, or a ship, that you can do certain things. And then you can watch people in all types of environments. And you can actually steer them in such a way, they don't even know they're being steered.
No, that's very interesting too. And I do believe that to a certain extent. Yet I don't really think it was
master psychologist.
I don't really
nobody
think it was,
that pops him at it.
Well, no. I mean, honestly, through my observation, I didn't think it was necessarily so much. I believe there was systematic racism and all that type of stuff, like you're talking about. Yes, we agree on that. But also, to a certain level, everyone had to take responsibility for their actions. You know, like I knew if I stayed in there, I was going to have to be a different person than I wanted to be. Okay. Or it was going to be very difficult for me. Some people can be cool, but it's very difficult for them. But they feel like that's their only option, perhaps. But if everyone takes, because no matter what they did to me, I took responsibility for my action. I did not let them manipulate me. And yes, I had to deal with, instead of being I was big time at one point. Towards the end, when they realized I was really getting out, I was very serious about what I felt about the military. Because a lot of people in the Navy, they're like, fuck this, fuck that. And that's all of them. But they stay in. And that's not just black people. I mean, a lot of black people get out. That's all types of people. So if there's a racism or a systematic system going on, they're all experiencing it to a certain extent.
Yes, but I have this question.
Yes.
At what point in your existence on the planet did you take what you started saying, responsibility, and that you no longer were being manipulated? Because
honestly, to be honest with you, from day one, but I think they thought I was a teenager, and they just had to, praise me and give me everything that someone would want, and I mean, not saying I didn't earn these things. I took these tests, and I showed up on time, and I did what I was supposed to do, responsibly. But I mean, I was. All these awards, and then it's like, oh, you really are getting out. You really did just use this GI Bill and got, getting the fuck out, and not looking back.
That, but here's what I'm saying. Under the system of racism, because see, it's a world system.
But do you understand what I'm telling you too? The black people were the same way. I mean, I was in.
I understand this. I want you to listen to me for a minute. I understand all of that. And that's a part of the system.
Who are you trying to blame? Are you trying to blame the white people
for
manipulating the black people to be racist against me?
No, I'm telling you. I'm telling you what the perspective of the codification. The white supremacists, like the captain of a ship. Now, you said that you were on a ship. There's one thing that I've always been taught about a ship. Whether it's the Titanic or the Forrestal, the captain is to blame for everything that happens on that ship that doesn't supposed to happen. Now, haven't you been taught that? In the Navy, I think you would definitely be taught that.
Well, I didn't need to be taught that. I observed 3 different captains, and I saw how the system worked under different commands.
I mean, in the old days,
that I can observe that myself. I don't need someone to tell me.
Okay, well, I'm just saying this. Okay, now. Here's what, just bear with me for a minute. The entire planet is a ship. And the people who believe in the practice of white supremacy are running the entire ship. Now that's the premise. Now that's either true or false. The white people on this planet, not all, but just the white people who believe in white supremacy, they run the planet, period, of all of the business of the people who are classified as non-white. And those people conduct themselves the way that the people who run the planet wanted them conducted. If I board a ship and all the sailors are drunk, I don't bother with the sailors. Anybody who has ever inspected a ship will tell you this. They don't run up and down the deck trying to collar every sailor on that forestall, on that aircraft carrier, and barking at them. No. When they're inspecting that vessel and they find the sailors drunk on that vessel, they go straight to the captain's cabin. Now, the captain of the ship that we call the planet is run by people who believe in and who practice white supremacy. That's the concept. So if you're going to blame someone for anybody, because see,
I'm not blaming anyone. That's what I don't understand.
The people on the planet are all messed up.
No,
okay,
no,
wait a minute. Let me finish.
whole thing. This is my thing.
Okay.
Mr.
All
Fuller,
right.
Mr. Fuller, you
Yes,
as an individual, are you happy in your life?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and see,
Look,
that's the difference.
to be.
That's the difference, sir. I am, as some people in this chat room describe me, and I'm sure these people are black. I know they are, and very, not politically correct terms describing my ethnicity, which is unfortunate. And this just proves my point right here. And they think I'm lost, but they're proving my point right here in the chat room. But that's fine. I don't care what you want to call it. Okay.
Oh, you're not supposed to if you don't have a problem.
No. Sir, let me just finish my point. My point is that despite this racism that exists in society, I'm saying I am happy in my life. And I don't I socialize with anyone. I don't care what race you are, because I know there are good white people. I know there are good black people. I know there are bad people of all different races. And I've always been like that. Even it was way before the military.
But you say that. Well, wait a minute. You say something else though. You say that you're a female and that you're gay, correct?
Yes, I am.
Now,
which should be another shot against me, right? I should be angry,
no,
right? I should be like, oh my God, I can't have these benefits, and I'm not that way.
According to the code, that means that the white supremacists have done their job.
All right. Well, hey, their job worked for me. Well, thank you, white supremacists.
Yes, that's the very point. And you say that you're. Wait a minute, hold it. And you say that you're happy.
I am, and that's the truth. I'm
absolutely, absolutely, and that fits the old-fashioned description of gay. Now,
there you go. Hey, check out my homepage.
Yeah, you're gay and you're happy. Wait a minute. Now, let's look at it. That's the very point. The first part of the discussion this evening was just about the effect that the white supremacists want to have on what they consider to be non-white people. And that was my premise in the beginning.
Okay,
now,
I missed the beginning.
It's nothing better. It's nothing better than a happy person that the white supremacists have manipulated into being happy.
Why does it have to be white supremacists? Why can't it just be fighting for what you believe in? Why does it have to be why does it have to always be race when I'm saying individuals?
Well, in other words,
is Clarence Thomas, am I supposed to relate to him or something?
Wait a minute, say that again.
Am I supposed to be able
to
relate to Clarence Thomas? You want me to repeat myself?
Ask the question so that I'll know what the question is.
Am I supposed to be able to relate to Clarence Thomas?
Relate to him how? You're supposed to be able to relate. to
Well,
people.
I mean, if you're listening to what I'm saying in a row, I'm saying, am I supposed to automatically assume that I am to get along or be able to relate to every black person, or assume that every black person is for my best interest? Or should I assume that a black person over a white person is in my best interest just because that person
I'm
is
fixing
black?
to answer that's what I mean by asking one question at a time and answering that question. Okay. In answer to the first question, no, under this system, the way it's set up, you're not supposed to be able to relate to anybody in a constructive fashion, except the white supremacists when they want you to do it. Okay? So you got to think about what is their objective, because whether anyone realizes.
So this young lady who is gay basically is projecting on black people her hatred for her black side and doesn't even recognize that psychosis that she is dealing with. So she's blaming or trying to get, it's like talking to a demon in a way, someone who's possessed, and they're trying to deflect from the problem that you know that is a problem so that it doesn't have to leave the body. You're sitting up here throwing crosses and every holy water on it, and it's fighting you and telling you no. That's just my observation. Let's continue.
Or not, which just shows how good they are. They want to have absolute control without the person knowing that they are being controlled. That's the perfect situation. So that the person thinks that, oh, what I'm doing is just the things that I want to do.
Do you think you're not being controlled?
Let me say this.
You are being controlled.
Let me say this. Let me say this about the way the white supremacists operate. Because many people think this. The Indians thought that. I'm in control.
No,
sitting
I'm
up here as
asking
drunk
you,
as they
do
can
you
be.
think you're in control because you're making it seem like you have more control because you're able to think past the white supremacist game plan? And what I'm saying is, what makes you think you have more control or more freedom than I do? Perhaps, and I don't know for a fact, but perhaps I might have more freedom than you do.
He just told you he wasn't happy. You said you were happy.
See,
Yes.
but that's another thing that the white supremacists do. Wait a minute. Let's hold it just
reality,
a second.
not the reality somewhere on Red Planet, whatever these people are from in this chat room.
Well, let me answer the questions as we go along. I'm not saying that you don't have anything. I'm saying what counter-racist logic says, because I'm dealing with racism. Now, I'm also saying something else, which you have said to me, and I'll just repeat it. You said you really got no problem with because you have figured out a way to be happy.
I did not say I don't have more problems. I said that perhaps
what
my
did you
situation
say? You said you were happy.
is a little bit more. I did say I'm happy, and you said you were unhappy. I said perhaps my situation, not knowing you personally, but knowing my situation, perhaps I have more freedoms. And I don't want to get into the details because I will assume that you understand what I mean by freedoms or freedom, benefits or whatever you want to talk about, than you.
No problem. But see, here's what. That's exactly what I mean by the system of white supremacy. And one thing I want to definitely make clear. Wait a minute.
Right.
Hold it. I'm trying to make something.
My situation is better than a lot of
I know,
white
but you're trying to.
How are the white people controlling?
Wait a minute. But see, we think.
Puerto Rico got destroyed.
See, there's an anxiety here, and this is exactly what is supposed to be avoided. We are trying to even talk over each other. This is exactly what happens under the system of white supremacy, and neither one of us are white supremacists. That's number one.
Absolutely.
Because I know you're not a white supremacist if you're considered to be non-white.
Absolutely.
All right, because you can't be.
That's
You
why
got to
I'm
be
trying
white
to make
to be
the
a white
point to
supremacist.
you as a non-white person that's telling
I
you
know
my
that, but here's
situation
what.
is better
But
than
see,
white, and you might
Hold
have
on a second, ma'am. Hold on a second. Hold on a second, ma'am.
I have to explain something very important as to what's going on right here. The very fact that we have this high-pitched conversation means that the system is working exactly the way they want it.
Exactly.
Because, see, now, I talk to white people. It's a white lady that calls me every day or every other day and has been doing it for years. We don't get into this. And you know why?
Well, good. I'm glad you're socializing with white people.
Wait a minute. No. Wait, hold it. You see, you're doing it again.
She's not controlling
See,
you like
hold
on a second, ma'am.
See, the anxiety is there. The anxiety is there. You can see it. You can't even wait for me to explain something because the anxiety is there.
You keep saying certain things that really don't connect. I don't get your point.
But you are saying it as if you.
And I'm asking you questions because at one point your concept seemed maybe a little unique, but maybe I haven't been paying attention to all the other shows that these people from the chat room all because maybe this, honestly, I think that. This show is very interesting. I do, I think I enjoy the host.
But I got a question.
I like the way it goes. But in all honesty, I understand your point. You don't know my background, so I've heard everything you have to say before, unfortunately. But I do wish you the best, and much love to the people in the chat room who don't understand what I'm talking about. Much love.
Thank you. I find that very interesting. I want you to finish your point that you wanted to make with the caller, but I also want to reiterate.
Yes, so what happened? What has been happening between me and the caller has been exactly what's not supposed to happen. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. But every time it is this way. See, I was on a program the other night. Same thing. See, because the white supremacist has it set up so that this is a guarantee.
Exactly.
See, the very fact that she feels even interested enough to have these conversations, all right, and then have this kind of anxiety while she's having it.
Same way between black men and black women here on YouTube. The same psychology behind all of that. Why they don't want us to communicate. But you let a black man talk to a white woman and he can communicate with her. You let a black woman talk to a white man. Like we seen on Cynthia G's channel, she had the white man come on her channel and talk to her. Fine. But let her talk to a black man on her channel and it will be, we're arguing amongst each other. And this is a perfect example of what the white supremacy.
That is exactly what the white supremacists want. And this is why I say the code says, hey, if you're going to have an argument, you don't have arguments about race with no other black person ever, or no other non-white person. It's never supposed to happen. All arguments are supposed to be between white and non-white. All, without exception. Never. See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
But see, because it's going to be automatic when it's white. When it's non-white with non-white.
That I think it is fabulous that you were able to demonstrate that in the caller. Thank you for calling in for demonstrating that. I wanted to remind our listeners, most of these programs, and I believe this is about the 40th program that I have done addressing racism, white supremacy. Most of my programs, I have white people on. In fact, we have a white professor from the University of Southern California. She's coming on in less than 30 minutes to talk about white supremacy. And I generally never have that much interrupting, that much anxiety, tension in the conversations I have with white people. Even if we do not agree, I've had Tim Wise on the show, and we didn't agree about very much of anything. He's not a fan of mine. I'm not a fan of his. But we did not have nearly as much tension, yelling, interrupting in the conversation. It was smooth. The person would allow you to make your statement, voice where they didn't agree. No yelling, no voices raised, no interruptions. Very stark contrast in most of the conversations I observe between non-white people and other non-white people about racism. It ends up being arguments and complaints and just not constructive communication. So I'm very thankful that you pointed that out. And if you could you finish your statement about your thoughts that she said she was gay and she said she was happy, and you felt that was by white supremacist design. If you could perhaps maybe wrap up, and if you could explain that thoroughly for us, so we all
yes,
get an
I mean, once you get the non-white person in a state of mind and a viewpoint of life, of what life should be about for them, as a victim. I mean, there's an old adage. I mean, there's nothing better than having a happy slave. That's a perfect situation. A slave that's walking around grumpy all the time, man, is dangerous. I mean, and any slave master going all the way back through history, I mean, will tell you whether, you're talking about the Roman Empire or you're talking about a plantation slave owner in Louisiana. They will sell a grumpy slave down the river first time they get a sale. And then one thing they don't want the rumor to get out. Now, this slave is always grumpy, always complaining about everything. Don't like nothing. Don't like the food. Don't like the plantation. Can't stand the master. But the slave that's playing that banjo and kicking up his heels and think he's in heaven, that's the one we want to keep. A grumpy slave might slip up behind you any dark night with an axe.
Poison your tea.
Well, I assume our caller, it seemed like from what she was saying on the phone, she doesn't think white supremacy is that much of a problem. She said she was happy. I assume white supremacy.
And another thing, I just want to interject this. That was very important, but she wouldn't let me get that word in. If she's already happy with the way everything is, then why bother with having these kind of conversations at all? See what I mean?
Yes, sir.
I wrote my book only for people who say that they are victims. It says right on the cover. I've run into dozens of people who say, I'm not a victim. I say, well, then the book is not for you. If racism doesn't affect you, that you don't have no problem with it or nothing like that, there's nothing in this book for you. And in fact, the only suggestion I have for you is to teach other people how you were able to pull it off. You're a black person and you've never been victimized by racism. And if you were victimized, you came up with a way of dealing with it that really worked for you. I said, you should do, what the code says that every person should do to find themselves in that golden position. Teach other people exactly how you did it, all the steps that you took. And I said, and you can start with me.
If being so-called homosexual is a part of that process, I think I'm gonna have to pass and find.
No, I'm gonna pass on that part.
Yeah,
see what I mean? Because that's a part of the racist conspiracy. I've already decided that. See, so if they come to me, well, Fuller, if you really don't want to deal with racism and be happy,
being rich in Hollywood and scamming people, doing rituals, blood rituals, and all that stuff. If that's what it takes, I'll pass on that too. I'll pass on that.
and get all kind of benefits, which he mentioned benefits,
Yes,
and all like that, and go on and live your life. Then, Fuller, you got to become a homosexual. And then I say no, because that's a part of their plot. It's not a part of mine. No, I'm not doing that. Yeah, I know about the benefits that go with that. I've seen it. But are they really benefits?
Exactly.
What does it, and I have this written in some of my notes, what does it matter to gain the whole world
Exactly.
and have to give up your gender?
What is it like to gain the whole world and give up your soul?
As I said, we have a suspected white supremacist. She's going to be coming on the program in about 20 minutes to talk about her book. Her her name is Arela Gross. She's a professor at the University of Southern California. Could you please share with our audience how they can get a copy of your book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept?
Oh, they can just call me by telephone, and I'll give them the price and send it to them.
Okay.
Price is $15. Okay. And 202-484-5461. I got about 6 copies left, and then I can have to direct them to African World Books over in Baltimore, and see if they can get it from them. That's African World Books at 2217 Pennsylvania Avenue. 2217 Pennsylvania Avenue, Baltimore, Maryland. That's temporarily. And the reason for this, I got about 6 books left myself. I'm just about run out, but I'll have more coming in after the 20th of this month.
Okay.
20th of October, right. But right now, I got about 6 copies left. So 202-484-5461. That's my phone number, which I'm talking to right now.
Outstanding. I also want to let people know his book is linked. If you're listening from Blog Talk Radio, his book, you can click on the picture, and if you try to get it directly from Mr. Fuller, please do that first. If you try to get it from him, he's out. If you're looking for other routes to get the book as soon as possible, I think you can click that picture, and it'll take you to Amazon.com, and you can purchase it there as well. So just click the picture. If you try to call Mr. Fuller, if he's out of those 6, then that's another way you can get it if you want to try and get it as soon as possible. I definitely want to thank you for taking time out of your evening to speak with us. Very constructive. I'm thankful that the caller, she called in because I felt that was a brilliant demonstration of exactly what we talked about. She said she was happy and gay. I am not happy. I am not gay. I am a victim of white supremacy, and if doing so-called homosexual activity, if that's the only option that the racists are willing to present me of how I can be happy, I'm going to have to pass and think of something else. If you'd like to close out with anything, Mr. Fuller, please say anything you'd like to before we get ready to close this program out.
Okay, I just want to say that the compensatory code is different in a lot of other approaches. See, I'm not looking for a consensus. I just put out information like I did with everybody before the lady called in. And the book is for victims of racism, people who want to do something about racism. Even if a person doesn't consider themselves a victim, or even if the person does consider him or herself a victim, but they just don't like what I present in my book. They don't have to. It's not dictatorial. It's just a book of suggestions. Because there are no experts on racism except the racists themselves. So I'm just one of the people out here who's trying to come up with formulas for replacing it with a system of justice. And a person can use some of the formulas or not. It's all optional. It's not dictatorial at all. You're not looking for consensus like an organization. The compensatory code is not an organization. It's just a means of trying toward an end. Now, some people say, well, racism doesn't bother them, so it's only for people who racism bothers. That's all that it's for. It's not for people who are not interested. Many people have told me, I have no interest in that. And I read your book, and there's nothing in it that will help me do anything. I don't need it. And I say, well, we don't have any argument there. I'm not looking for an argument. It's only for people who think that they need something or that they can use something that's in it. Like an auto mechanics book.
Right.
If you don't drive a car, you're not interested in cars, you don't own a car, you're not working on cars or nothing like that, why study a book on cars? Yeah, it's as simple as that. You go into a bookstore, you pick up the books that you need. If you are not into gardening, growing asparagus, and you never will be, why pick up a book on asparagus? It's just that simple.
I feel the exact same way. Justice, did you have a question before we let Mr. Fuller go?
No, but you very much for the information.
And thank you. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 10.
You're 10.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that is kind of young to be seeking information of the type that I'm putting out. But it's never too young to start. And like I say, you don't have to agree with any part of anything that anybody says. In fact, I would advise you not to agree, but just listen and then listen to other people. And after you have listened to as many people as you can possibly listen to, make up your own mind. And I'd like to leave that with everybody. Always don't let anybody, make up your mind for you about serious issues.
It's just some things we have to figure
Because
out on our
for a
own.
very logical reason. People make too many mistakes. Always follow logic. The logic that you get from listening to everybody, and then out of everything that's said, try to find out what the truth is and what's the best way to go.
Well, family, thank you so much for being here. Like, just might do another part. Just might do another part of being blocked from our greatness, talking about all the ways that we are preoccupied with our conditions and prohibited from moving forward successfully. And what I mean by moving forward successfully is, of course, without any of the programming hindrance, such as sexuality confusion, disease of any sorts, STDs, as well as cancers, high blood pressure, diabetes, all of these things, overweightness, um, just pretty much anything that has weakened us mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Anything set out to do those things physically, I meant physically, mentally, and um, spiritually, hindrance and preventing us, blocking us, causing a blockage to our path of greatness. Because that's clearly what it all amounts to. So, family, thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Emmanuel. Thank you, Omega. Courtney. Thank you, sister. Thank you, Yusuf from the Ratchet Today's show. Thank you, brother. Thank you for being here. And with that said, always remember true love, real peace, and the higher self within us, our soul.